Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. Let's talk boxing. We're going to start off talking about Shakur Stevenson and his very unconvincing victory over Edwin De Los Santos. Personally, I had him just about edging it 7 rounds to 5, but I've got no problem if he had it a draw or even to De Los Santos very narrowly. There are very knowledgeable boxing people out there who are unbiased and know how to score a fight, and they felt that De Los Santos did enough to win the fight. We're going to talk about why there were so many issues, in my opinion, caused for Shakur Stevenson from a stylistic perspective, because now inevitably you've got the overreaction. All of a sudden he's food for the top guys. I keep telling people styles make fights. Everybody repeats it. No one seems to believe it. But regardless, we'll get to all of that. We'll talk about the technical elements, because there are going to be some other fighters who might not be the most elite names who could potentially cause him some real problems if he doesn't address certain areas. We're also going to talk about Emmanuel Navarrete. That was a fight I actually had him losing 114, 112 to Robson Conceicao. Again, I have no problem if it narrowly went to Navarrete or if you had it a draw, which is what the judges scored it as. No issues at all. But we'll talk about these two fights and some of the stylistic and technical elements. Before we do, let me just say this. With regards to the scoring of Shakur Stevenson, forget the actual technical elements. I had a couple of people that were giving me real pressure last night. What are you talking about, Chris? What is it that you're watching? Shout out to Kofi and Javier. Both of you were doing my nut last night, but they're two nice guys, and I enjoyed talking to them about boxing. But one of them had it 9-0, I think, after 9 rounds. The other one had it 11-1 to Shakur Stevenson. Listen, you have to try and understand something, and you have to try and explain something to me. One of the judges had it 7-5 to Shakur Stevenson, like I did. The other 2 judges had it 8-4 to Shakur Stevenson. In other words, if one of the rounds I gave to De Los Santos went to Shakur, then they have it the same as me too. So they're having it very close to what I had it. If Shakur Stevenson won 11-1 or 10-2, as you guys feel, explain to me why Shakur Stevenson is the A-side fighter on a top-ranked show and the judges are scoring it that close. Do you think they were trying to rob the A-side fighter? Why is it that after the fight, the interviewer of Top Rank got into the ring and he asks De Los Santos, number one, what did you think of the scorecard, and do you want a rematch? Can you give me another example in history where the big superstar A-side fighter is fighting an unknown quantity, a B-side who's never fought at the highest level? He loses a fight wide, 10-2, 11-1, and he's being asked by the person who is in his best interest to build up one guy as an asset, what did you think of the scorecards, and do you want a rematch? All of those things combined should tell you how close that fight was. Go and watch those first 5 rounds again on slow motion. Count the punches. He was losing those first rounds. And we're going to talk about why. First and foremost, one of the major problems that Shakur Stevenson had is that he was facing a fellow southpaw, and it was a chess match early on. It was like a game of tag. You know that game? Tag, you're it, and then you try and tag me back and I tag you. And ultimately, he was the one getting tagged more often. He was getting touched more often. It was a low-volume fight early on. Neither guy was landing anything of note. Neither guy was landing anything significant. But he was getting out-jabbed more often than not. He was getting outworked. And if you notice, in the Navarrete fight, which we'll come on to later, you were hearing things like, and Christina Poncha does this an awful lot, and I find it so frustrating. There was a punch that was thrown at one point, and it came off of the gloves of Navarrete. And she goes, right hand lands there. And straight away I've tweeted to say, no, it didn't. It landed on the gloves. He's stepping back. It doesn't even land on glove and face. His hands are in front of him. It lands on the gloves. It doesn't come near his face. But the commentator says it landed. She also mentioned a shovel hook that she said landed. Again, it didn't. So you're hearing a lot of these sorts of comments all the time. And it throws people more often than not. And when the knockdown came, when Navarrete dropped, and I'm moving on to that fight, we'll come back to that later, I promise. I'm just digressing to make a point about Shakur. When the knockdown came, you heard Michaela Maya say, I'm not sure what punch knocked him down, and neither was Christina Poncha. And I instantly tweeted, not sure what punch had knocked him down, it was the lead uppercut. The replay then comes out 30 seconds later and it shows it was a lead uppercut. In other words, I really do trust my eyes. Even when the bullets are flying fast, I see the punches coming. So when I say, guys, please go and watch it on slow motion, I've had a few people that have said to me, but Chris, that's not how boxing's scored. I know that that's not how boxing scored, and I see in real time what's landing and what's not. The reason I'm telling you to go and watch it on slow motion is because if you've not seen it, then I'm just encouraging you to be able to slow it down and see it. You don't have to watch it on slow motion. I don't need the slow motion. But if you do, if we've got a difference of opinion as to what landed and what didn't, feel free to watch it on slow-mo. Now, one of the problems that Shakur had And the reason he wasn't landing as much is because his skill set tends to shine when he's facing another orthodox fighter. He's a southpaw. You see, Shakur Stevenson likes to use that lead hand to dominate the opponent, and often he seeks to engage the lead hand of the opponent. So when he's a southpaw with his right hand in front and he's facing an orthodox fighter who's got his left hand in front, their two hands are next to each other, and he will pat down on that hand. He's manipulating it. He's using it for distance control. If that lead hand, he'll pull it down and work from there. If that lead hand is out of position, he'll hook around it. If your lead hand's tight to your head, you've left a gap through the middle, he can jab through it. He can, because of his great feet as well, very fast feet, he'll step to the outside of your lead foot very quickly, and because the center line then becomes lined up with the backhand shoulder, he can throw a very straight punch with the backhand, whether it's to the face or the solar plexus. The thing that he likes to do, though, that he really excels at, where he's really spectacular, is his speed of exit. His exit point, his feet backing up are so fast that what happens is he gets you to overreach. So he'll be in range and you're trying to punch, and he jumps back so quickly. He'll hop back, hands up in the air, the front foot will come back to the back foot, so he's not in a position to counter early on in a fight quite often. And he's making you overreach. You're falling short because he's so fast, and then he'll step back in, and again you feel like you need to throw, and he steps back out. It's foot pressure, but he's judging the distance of your attacks and the speed of your attacks. After that, once he gets to grips with them, once he realizes, right, he's going to fall short, say at this range here, he'll jump back. He's at that range there. He might even lean back, so he'll take half a step back, and from leaning back and you falling short, he'll counter you. And he's either going to counter you with that backhand, sometimes it'll be an uppercut, or sometimes with the lead hand as well, like a check hook. But from that shot, once he's landed his power shot and he's made you overreach and you're out of position because you've overlent on your front foot, he'll throw that lead arm up, hide behind the shoulder, pivot out and get out, and he's getting you to then reset. That's his bread and butter. This is what he does again and again and again and again, and people struggle to deal with that. He'll vary the methodology of what he does. Like I said, he'll use head control to pivot out. He'll pull your hand down to create the space to land the hook around the guard. He'll line you up in different ways with the backhand for the jab. But the concept of what he does is that he can make you overreach and then go to work. If he's going to stand in the pocket, it's often because, again, he's pivoting and creating new angles and he's making you overreach. When he's facing De Los Santos, who's a southpaw, and he's not right in front of him to be manipulated in that way, now it's, and he's not running in on Shakur recklessly so Shakur can just jump back and counter him. Now Shakur has to try and figure ways out of not being just a counter puncher, but to create openings. He's got to be the one sometimes to lead in with the shot. And this is where he started to have problems, because although he's got very fast feet, I think De Los Santos' hands were faster. And so he had a bit of a problem here, Shakur Stevenson. Now I know Jamil Herring is a southpaw, and you're going to tell me, Chris, he looks spectacular against him. The difference is with Herring is that there's less of a bladed stance. He stands more square on, right, rather than off the shoulder, and he often has a high guard. You're given a lot of the target towards the aim of Shakur Stevenson, and he's able to jab through the center line and then break your high guard by coming around the hook as well. So he ends up splitting your high guard, and there's not much lateral movement from Jamil Herring. He was a sitting duck. I mean, listen, it was a great performance from Shakur, but he was not finding it difficult to find Jamil Herring. Forget the defensive aspects. From an offensive aspect, he was there to be hit. And in fact, you saw in the build-up to this fight, when they were doing I can't remember what it's called, not 24/7, I think it was called Blood, Sweat and Tears or whatever it was, and they were tracking De Los Santos. They caught something which I actually thought was a bit disrespectful, but because Jamil Herring was a world champ. But the trainer of De Los Santos was calling Herring a bum when they were analysing what it is that he was doing. So there were certain elements there that were very easy for Jamil Herring, for Shakur Stevenson. Typically speaking, you're not going to get that easy work really from a southpaw. What's happening is that De Los Santos would have quite a heavy step with that first shot, which would be a throwaway shot, a feint essentially. Then he's going to step in with a power jab. And because Shakur's jumping back, that first shot won't land. The second shot's landing off into the chest. He's landing to the body. Shakur's not throwing anything back. When he would sporadically seek to throw a jab back, De Los Santos would hold his feet and punch back immediately. He's got those fast hands. So he's landing back on Shakur immediately. At no point was Shakur outlanding him, making him fall short, making him look silly. Early on in the fight, he was struggling. By the 6th round, though, the tempo of what De Los Santos was doing was constant. In other words, he was constantly finding that heavy step on the front foot and then jumping into that jab. Think of it like cricket, right? Or baseball for the Americans out there, whatever it is that you want to use as an analogy. If you're constantly throwing a fastball or a speed ball or whatever it's called, a fast ball in cricket, the cricketer, the batter, starts to understand the speed. When you start to vary it up, you throw a slow ball, a spinner in cricket or whatever, all of a sudden he has to try and readjust and reread that. That didn't happen last night for Shakur. It wasn't necessary. So he started to hold his feet a little bit more in round 6. And what you started to see him do is throw a jab, pull back with a little step back as the counter jab was attempted. Then he'd jab again, but then get out. He wasn't staying in the pocket. Now, in the preview to the fight, I didn't do a video, but somebody asked me online if I thought he would win the fight, Shakur, or if he would get knocked out. And I said, listen, I expect Shakur to actually stop him. Because one of the things about De Los Santos, he's powerful. But when he can throw hooks, he often has quite wide, there's a width on his hooks. And we know that Shakur Stevenson changes their level well. And he keeps his chin quite high up in the air, De Los Santos. So I'm figuring if they're going to be exchanging, you're going to see some hooking and over-the-top hands come in with De Los Santos missing and getting clipped. And we've seen him hurt on a few occasions before. And I think once he reads his timing and his distance, he'll end up taking him out. At no point did he ever feel comfortable to start letting go of that backhand and really stay in the pocket. I think he threw the 1-2 with an effective backhand 2 or 3 times the whole fight. But in the last rounds, he took over. He did start to read De Los Santos because of that predictability. There was no alteration on there. There was a point where he really started to have a bit more of a risk. He did take one in round 12. But in general, at least change the speed up of what you're doing, change the methodology of your feints, give some shoulder feints, change the height dynamic, make it harder for Shakur Stevenson to realize what it is that you're doing. But the point is, when it was Shakur that had to initiate, he's the one that had to come forward and try and create openings, he was struggling. And there are going to be certain southpaws out there that are going to be licking their lips. You've got a guy like Lomachenko, for instance. He's old now, Loma. He's not the guy he used to be. He can't maintain the tempo he used to maintain. And you saw that against Teofimo Lopez and against Devin Haney because he had a really strong finish towards those fights, except in the last round. I don't buy this idea that he was winning so far ahead of Haney that he took his foot off the gas. I don't believe that for a second. I think he's of a certain age now and he just can't maintain that. But stylistically, if we're talking about a prime Loma, currently, as Shakur is now, prime Loma beat Shakur Stevenson, even though he's a naturally smaller man. He would give him so many problems because Shakur would not be able to find that ability to manipulate. You would see that lead hand messing around of Lomachenko. And when he gets up close, Shakur Stevenson against southpaws has this tendency of having a shell in the pocket. And he can stay quite tall with it. And even if he doesn't, when he dips, he doesn't hide behind the shoulder. And so he's open as well to those over-the-top hooks over the shoulder, something that Clary gave him issues with, or Clary, however you pronounce his name. Lomachenko's excellent at bringing hooks over the top of someone's shoulder from the blind side. He actually uses that shoulder to hide what it is that he's trying to do. And because he's got short arms, he can get full extension with some powerful shots. The other guy that could potentially give him a real issue is William Zepeda, because he's ultra aggressive. He will come forward. He's quite rangy, throws big, powerful shots. If he's going to keep coming forward, there's the possibility, unlike Valdez, who's very aggressive but is short and is always overreaching, when Shakur's pulling out in straight lines, if Zepeda can get close enough to let go of big, powerful shots, he could be catching Shakur on his exit and then force Shakur to start to trade with him. Now, we've seen Shakur yesterday didn't want to seemingly trade with him. Why? Maybe there's something there that we don't know about. Maybe he's not as durable as people might assume he is. And if that's the case, you don't want to be in there against a William Zepeda. There are other guys as well that you might consider, southpaws. Guys like Frank Martin, guys like Tank Davis, guys like Maxi Hughes. The difference with them is that they're shorter. And because of that fast exit from Shakur Stevenson, I wonder whether they would be able to get close enough consistently enough. I don't think Maxi Hughes and Frank Martin would be able to. I think with regards to Tank Davis, he only needs one shot, so you can't ever write him out against anybody at lightweight. But he's also predominantly at his best when he's a counterpuncher. So you're going to have two counterpunchers against each other. I would still favour Shakur right now in that particular matchup. But these are all interesting fights. With regards to the likes of Devin Haney, who everybody's talking about, and he's calling him a bum and stuff like that, that's a very different type of fight. Because with Devin Haney, he's an orthodox fighter. And he also has his own issues against southpaws. He has his own problems with trying to cover up against southpaws. We saw it against Jojo Diaz. In addition to that, After you bypass the jab of Devin Haney, his go-to is to change the level to get low below the waist to keep himself safe, to thrust forward and tie you up, to clinch. Shakur Stevenson's very accurate with certain sort of shovel hooks and uppercuts. If he's able to time Devin Haney, if he's able to stay out of the way of that jab by jumping out and then coming back in, and then on the inside have enough space to be landing consistently, Haney could be in trouble. So don't just assume because, you know, there are some stylistic issues there that all the top fighters go and beat him. That's not going to happen.
He's still elite, and it's very possible that he goes on to beat everybody in this division and become undisputed champion.
Now, quickly moving on from that, Emmanuel Navarrete, very close fight. His tempo seemed to be lower than usual. It wasn't as incessant, the pressure, but you saw what a good fighter Robson Conceicao is and why I gave so much credit to Shakur Stevenson for fighting him, because he lets go of so many punches, very technically astute, and you saw that when it came to Navarrete, one of the things that he was doing often, he would be looking to just duck forward, duck to the side, and then launch this uppercut. When he was getting caught with the first shot, he would duck down. And so what was happening is Robson Conceicao was throwing like a right hook or a right hand. It was catching Navarrete, who was ducking forward slightly. And then he would follow it up with that shovel hook to the body. And that combination of switching from the head to the body and throwing these hooks, he was finding a home for it quite consistently.
So it wasn't covering his body particularly well, Navarrete, but on his exit, he's very, very quick in a deceptive way.
But when he was then trying to just throw this wide uppercut with a big tail on it, Robson Conceicao wasn't leaning over that front foot, and it wasn't there for him most of the time. When you did start to see him have a lot more success is when he started to shorten up his punches. He'd get his feet closer and he would start to throw these flurries of short shots. And when he would back up Conceicao onto the ropes, he'd find a home for that right hook to the body. He was doing the more damage and work, but it was very sporadic. He dropped Conceicao on a couple of occasions. In terms of who won the majority of the rounds, there's no doubt it was Conceicao. Even if you had Navarrete winning by one, well, he dropped him twice. So there's no doubt that Conceicao won the majority of the rounds. And you heard them last night. This is what they tried to do with A-sides, right? This is what they were doing last night of Shakur as well. This is what they were trying to do with Navarrete. This is where the propaganda and the agenda-driven commentary comes into it. They were saying things like Conceicao is throwing pebbles and Navarrete is throwing boulders. If that was true, he would have walked straight through him and started to bust him up like he always does, this big, aggressive Terminator type fighter. Why wasn't he doing it? We always hear the same thing when Adrian Broner fought Paulie Malignaggi. Malignaggi's feather-fisted though. So then why did he walk through him? I don't understand this. He's throwing all these punches. He's making him reset. He's landing on him. Yeah, sure, Navarrete's the bigger power puncher. But you've got to be landing to be winning the fight. You can't be getting outworked for the majority of the rounds. Now, there were some close ones in there where you did have Conceicao landing a lot of punches. Navarrete's also landing a lot of punches, but not as many, and they're destructive. That's why I don't hate it if someone had Navarrete edging the fight. But the way they were talking about it on the commentary team, in my opinion, was just, it was too pro Navarrete, let's put it that way. And I love Navarrete. He's a pay-per-view fighter as far as I'm concerned. All action stuff, very, very talented without people realizing how good he is at certain things. But you've still got to be landing the punches consistently or dropping a guy, hurting him badly to be winning the rounds. And one of the things that stood out as well, by the way, was the lack of fear from Robson Conceicao. So when Navarrete was throwing something big, Conceicao would instantly come back with big shots. So he's landing shots. Then when Navarrete's letting go of something big, Conceicao's instantly coming back with something big as well. And he's reading those predictable ducking patterns of Navarrete. When he's at range, he's jabbing to the chest a lot. So that's stopping Navarrete from just ducking or slipping and coming back with something big because he's forcing him to reset. He's getting him off balance. At the end of round 11, you saw Conceicao stagger back to his corner. I thought, you know what, he could get taken out here. But Navarrete didn't really come up with that onslaught in that 12th round. It was Conceicao who really started to outwork him again and give everything he had in that 12th. But by then, a lot of these punches were ragged, right? I always say, if you're outlanding someone, you get the round on my card. This was a swing round because a lot of them were ragged and they weren't clean and effective punches. Whereas in the last minute and a half or minute of the round, Navarrete started to put it on him a lot more and he started to land the more clean punches. So again, that round was sort of like a swing round. I don't have a problem with who you scored this fight to, but it was very, very close. And the thing is, whenever there's a very, very close fight, like the two last night, it does always seem to be the A side that gets the decision, doesn't it? Anyway, let me know what you think, ladies and gents, about these two fights, about the future of these two fighters. It looks like there's going to be a rematch between Navarrete and Conceicao. I'm all for that. Please don't forget to hit a stiff jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button, and an uppercut notifications button. Thanks for watching. Take care. God bless.